Okay, we're live. Hi, this is William Ramsey. Welcome to William Ramsey Investigates. On tonight's show, I have a very special guest. His name is Adam Gorightly. He has just published a book. It came out February 3rd, 2021. The title of the book is Saucers, Spooks and Kooks, UFO Disinformation in the Age of Aquarius. I just finished the book today. It's a fascinating read. Yesterday, I had on a guest, Ralph Blumenthal, about John Mack. So this week, it's kind of continuing kind of a UFO theme. But this is not the first book for people who haven't heard of Adam Gorightly. He's written many other books. One is, The Prankster and the Conspiracy, the story of Kerry Thornley and how he met Oswald and inspired the counterculture. That was published in 2003. A book that I've read, which is also an excellent book, is The Shadow over Santa Susana, Black Magic, Mind Control, and the Manson Family. That was Mythos, published in 2009. And another book, Historia Discordia, with an intro by Robert Anton Wilson, somebody I'm familiar with. That was published or republished in 2014. There's also another UFO book, A is for Adamski, The Golden Age of the UFO Contactees, published 2018. But this book goes into a lot of information about really kind of this dulce base, and it's a perfectly titled book because it really is about saucers, spooks, and kooks. So Adam Gorightly, are you there?
Yes, I am. Thanks for having me on, William.
Awesome. Well, thanks for agreeing to the interview. For people maybe who aren't as familiar, I mean, I talked about some of your books. Can you talk about your background and what progressed up into writing this fascinating book, Saucers, Spooks, and Kooks?
So I had my own odd UFO experience back when I was in my late teens. And really don't need to get into all that now, but that got me interested in the subject. Actually, I was interested even before that, when I was like 13, 14, 15. That was kind of the period where you had, what was the old In Search Of, and a lot of those paperback books that look similar to the cover of Saucers, Spooks, and Kooks, So as a teen growing up, I was interested in the topic and also got interested in conspiracy theories, the JFK assassination. So, I got immersed in the scene over the years, started writing for zines in the 90s on a lot of these topics. And you mentioned Shadow over Santa Susana, Black Magic, Mind Control, and the Manson Family Mythos. Wrote that around 2000. My interest really getting into writing that book had to do with these theories I had heard about the Manson family as part of a military mind control experiment. So that's how I kind of began researching that topic, and that evolved into, turned out to be like a several hundred-page book on the entire Manson family thing. So I've been in the scene looking at UFOs, paranormal conspiracies, and a lot of the subject and matter in the book I was first exposed to in the late 80s and 90s, and continued being interested in the subject. And about 10 years ago, decided to take a deeper dive into the whole dulce base mythos, which is one of the areas examined in the book.
Right. And so for people who haven't heard or may not be as knowledgeable, as in-depth as you about this situation, can you describe the dulce base and how it became this kind of foundational area and event in ufology?
Well, it really started with Paul Benowitz, Dr. Paul Benowitz, and you'd mentioned you just watched the documentary Mirage Men, which gets into the whole Benowitz affair. But kind of a thumbnail sketch. He was a physicist and also worked in avionics, did government contracts in the mid to late 70s, and was also a UFO enthusiast, cattle mutilation researcher. And He lived adjacent to Kirtland Air Force Base during that period, and he began seeing UFOs over the facility, which sparked his interest and concerned him because he saw it as a national security threat, perhaps. So at that time, he started filming these UFOs, and he was also had some really sophisticated listening equipment for picking up different signals and whatnot. And once again, became concerned. He contacted the security there at Kirtland Air Force Base, let them know what he was seeing, and in turn, he became under surveillance by the Air Force Office of Special Investigations because they wanted to know exactly what Benowitz was picking up on. Benowitz began to believe these were UFOs, perhaps alien intelligence that were behind what he was witnessing. But at the same time, at Kirtland, there was a bunch of testing of secret craft going on during that period, and the signals he was picking up on were most likely this laser communication system they were also testing out that communicated with satellites. So that's how he came up on the radar of the intelligence agencies, the NSA and whatnot. They wanted to know what exactly Benowitz had figured out and if he was sharing any of this information with foreign nationals. Now, I'm slowly getting to the Dulce Base part of this. In 1980, there a lady by the name of Myrna Hansen. She was in her mid-20s. She and her son were traveling through Eagle Nest, New Mexico, when they witnessed a UFO. And the UFO, according to her story, a beam came down and tractor beam and sucked up a cow into the ship. And she went, wow. And then the next thing she knows, she's getting sucked up into the ship with her son, where she witnessed a cattle mutilation, of all things, conducted by these aliens. That's what she believed she was witnessing. Afterwards, she was hysterical. She contacted the local law enforcement there in Cimarron, New Mexico. They didn't know what to do with this story, but they knew about Gabe Valdez, who's kind of a famous figure. He's a New Mexico state trooper who was investigating cattle mutilations in relation to UFO sightings. Gabe talked to Myrna Hansen, and he also got in contact with Paul Benowitz, who he knew. Benowitz knew somebody did hypnotic regressions by the name of Leo Sprinkle, is another kind of semi-well-known name in ufological circles back in the day. And so they all got together, Benowitz, Myrna Hansen, and Leo Sprinkle, and started doing some hypnotic regressions on her. And this was shortly after her encounter in May 1980. Benowitz at that time was already beginning to believe that there was an alien threat, and so when they conducted the hypnotic regressions, they did it in his garage and in his Lincoln Town car, and he covered the whole thing with heavy-duty aluminum foil, but because he was concerned that the aliens were going to mess with the hypnotic regressions, try to whatever,
right,
clean her mind of the memories, etc.
Right. He was very deep. I mean, from the very beginning, it seemed like he was seeing aliens and connections all over the place between these people. But yeah.
And so they did a series of regressions, and at one point, Hansen recalled being taken by the ETs to an underground base. And remember, this is way back 1980, before a lot of these kind of legends started circulating. And at that base, she went under the medical procedure that abductees go through. She claimed she had been inserted with an implant at the base of her skull. And at one point, she broke free of her captives, and she saw what she described as these vats with these weird creatures inside of them, the alien human hybrids, and that whole scenario that would later play out, a decade later, in, X-Files and other films.
Yeah, right. You said that her regression sessions had many themes that would later litter UFO lore, so she was kind of like one of the first.
Yeah, and before that, you had some abductee experiences where people point to, well, you had Betty and Barney Hill back in the early 60s and Travis Walton in the mid 70s, but her experience really had all those elements in it that later became a mainstay in ufology, with the medical procedure, with the implant, with the alien hybrid experiments going on in an underground base. And this was all connected as well to cattle mutilations in one way or another. So I guess what I'm getting at with the Dulce base, Benowitz began to believe that the base she was talking about was in Dulce, New Mexico, which she was also investigating during this period. And he had began through his investigations, put together a report called Project Beta, which he was sending out to different politicians, sent a copy to Ronald Reagan and different U.S. state senators in New Mexico. And in one of the early letters in the early 80s he talked about a underground base where the U.S. government and the aliens had struck some type of treaty, and there was these experiments going on there. And Benowitz claimed at one point early on there had been a confrontation between the U.S. Government at the base and the aliens, and the base had been abandoned by the government. It wasn't clear what had happened to the workers there, but so that letter, those few things, documented things that Benowitz shared early on around 1980 or so, that later fed into the whole Dulce base mythos.
And that kind of like he was very serious. He created all these, like, he was trying to create a beam weapon or something like that. He was developing to fight. He was really deep. Like, the world was going to be an end, and he was going to have to neutralize extraterrestrials and things like that. So he was. And
remember, this was a very sharp guy. He had these government contracts. He was a physicist, and he set up this whole array of listening equipment to pick up these signals going to Kirtland. Now the story is that the AFOSI, and particularly Richard Doty, who was a special agent for the AFOSI, and you saw him in that Mirage Man.
Correct, and there's a picture of him in your book, right? Yeah,
there is. And so Doty got involved, and they began feeding him Benowitz disinformation to throw him off track, to confuse him what was going on at Kirtland Air Force Base, and they kind of pushed him in the direction of Dulce. That's how he got interested in Dulce, kind of to divert his attention and to further plant some disinformation that Doty would spread, perhaps to discredit him, but to also find out who he was communicating at. So it was all part of a big counterintelligence caper. Now, the space gun and that stuff. One story that's very interesting is that J. Allen Hynek of Project Blue Book fame, and later he was technical advisor for Close Encounters of the Third Kind. This was alleged by UFO author researcher Bill Moore, that he met Hynek in the early 80s during this time period when Hynek was still working for doing contract work for the Air Force. And at that time, Hynek, according to Bill Moore, claimed that he had gifted Benowitz a computer with a software program embedded. I'm not sure if Hynek told him it came from the Air Force, but that's where it came from. And Hynek informed Benowitz that there was software in there that would allow him to basically communicate with the aliens. And so that was another channel of myths or disinformation going on. And I document other people in the book actually saw Benowitz using that computer, so it's more than just a tall tale. So yeah, he got immersed in this, and he developed a space gun, as he called it, that he believed would thwart the aliens. I don't doubt he had something cooked up and conceived that he thought would deal with this alien menace that he perceived was working out of this Dulce base. And so all of this played out over the 1980s, and eventually Benowitz had a nervous breakdown, kind of exited from the field of ufology, but other people picked up on this story. One of whom was John Lear, who became a big promoter of the Dulce base story around 1989. I get pretty deep into how all of this developed and how other players got involved who may or may not have been spooks connected with intelligence agencies. Certainly John Lear had a background working with Air America as a pilot for the CIA, and another interesting character named Tal Levesque, and as well as a lady named who went by the name of Ann West, by the name of her real name's Cherry Hinkle, and those three were involved with the release of a document called the Dulce Papers back in '89, and it's really just an 8-9 page document with hand drawings of these the alien hybrids in the vat and that whole bit, and it told the story of a security worker by the name of Thomas Costello, who had been part of the confrontation, similar to what Benowitz had mentioned. And they went into more depth that 66 workers had been killed, and that Tom Costello had escaped, and he used a something called a flash gun. This is where I see more of the Benowitz influence, that it was picked up from Benowitz's space gun, this flash gun that helped him escape with film and photographs and other evidence, and he supposedly became a whistleblower. So this story became kind of a big deal in ufology during that period of the late 1980s, and continues to live with us to this day.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the whole interesting arc of your book, is that some of this disinformation is taken seriously, then somebody builds on it. Lear was the son of the Learjet fame, so he was wealthy, and you actually had a meeting, like you met face-to-face. You kind of play into this whole story, meeting face-to-face with Tal Levesque, right?
Yes. That's where it gets interesting, because, the whole thing's crazy.
It's interesting because in my mind, when I was reading the book, you were kind of in the place of somebody trying to kind of influence you. Did you feel like he was trying to influence you and plant ideas with you?
Oh, sure. So I wasn't familiar with Tal Levesque. Maybe I had heard the name prior to like 2006 or so, but as I document in the book, I got an email from him in, I guess it was 2007, and there was no name to the email. It was just a email saying, hey, I'm looking into developing a series on paranormal phenomena in Central California. He knew I lived here somehow, and wondering if you had witnessed anything. And he said he was also involved with the underground base episode of UFO Hunters as a producer, and you get a lot of emails from folks. I wasn't quite sure. He didn't say his name, but I had the email address, so I hit up Bill and Nancy Burns. Bill Burns was doing UFO Hunters and showed him the email address. Do you know this guy? And he says, oh, yeah, that he knows things. Okay. They said, that's Tal Levesque. I've heard that name before. So I started communicating with Levesque, and he'd been a long-time player in the paranormal UFO scene, high weirdness, dating back to at least the 70s, when he and his wife put out a kind of zine called the Hollow Earth Hassle, which had to do with inner Earth investigations and, kind of the Richard Shaver mythology. That whole thing about these underground creatures called the Diros that have been living there for hundreds of thousands of years, whatnot. And so, that was part of his background. He actually knew Richard Shaver back in the day. And as I learned, Tal was kind of one of those guys who knew a lot of people and had been involved as an influencer in this scene. He preferred to be a kind of a man behind the scenes, feeding information to other folks. So, prior to a lot of the Dulce base stuff, he had been interested in this Hollow Earth stuff, but he'd also been a security guard for many years, and he claimed he had knowledge of underground bases, all this kind of woven to this mythology that he helped put out there. And once again, people don't know that name, Tal Levesque, but he was feeding different researchers a lot of this information around the same time the Dulce papers came out. Tal, under the name of Jason Bishop, authored paper called the Dulce Base, and fed this to other people like John Lear, names you might know, William Hamilton, Val Valerian, put out the Matrix series. His real name was John Grace. Branton is famous. And all of these guys were kind of taking the stuff Tal was doing and then adding a little spin on it. And so all of these different writers and researchers were feeding this into ufology around the same time, and it looked like people confirming each other's stories, and that's the way it really gained traction within ufology. Early on, I began to suspect, as I was communicating with Tal, was that this character of Tom Costello was really a literary composite of Tal himself, his experiences, and those of Paul Benowitz. And for years and years, as I continued to interface with Tal, he denied that, that no, he's a real Tom Costello was a real person, until finally, for some reason, I guess he got tired of me asking these questions, and he admitted, I think it was around 2015, the letters at the end of the book, that he had created a large swath of the Dulce-based mythos.
Right, and so that was the whole thing. The underground caverns or whatever were tied to Dulce, but also existed in other parts of the country. And there were all the future writings after, like Dulce, there were all these. Can you talk a little bit about Majestic 12 and how that kind of plays in? There was all these documents that came out that supposedly verified the earlier information. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, that sure plays into it. Let me add to that a little bit before we get into MJ 12. So, Intel also in the 70s came across, he was the first one who came across those blueprints, the RAND blueprints with the tunnel boring machines. And if you look on the web, you'll find probably the most famous underground tunnel map you'll see, I bet if you did a search underground tunnels, you'll see one that comes up that with Tao's name on it, 1990. And that's the one a lot of people point to. But so he came across those documents somehow. It wasn't clear if he had worked for Rand or Rand Corporation or how he got them. And he fed them to researcher Richard Sauter, who in the mid-90s released a book, I forget the exact title, Underground Bases. So that's how that kind of helped that become a thing, the whole DUMS, deep underground military bases. And so the documents, MJ12 stuff, that's really goes into back to Benowitz and his interactions with Bill Moore, who I had mentioned earlier. In 1980, Moore published the first book on the Roswell incident, which up to that time had just been kind of a footnote in UFO history. People didn't really talk about Roswell much prior to that. You know, there was stories of flying saucer crashes and whatnot, but people, you know, remembered more Aztec was kind of a story. But the Roswell crash became a dominant story in 1980 with Bill Moore's book. And at some point, Moore was contacted by an intelligence official who he referred to afterwards as Falcon. And Falcon was supposedly a high-level intelligence officer. Wasn't clear at that time who he was, but Falcon approached Moore and said he'd been watching Moore. He was impressed with his research and that he'd like to get involved and offered him a deal that he would feed Moore top secret UFO information, classified stuff, if Moore in turn would keep tabs on ufology. At that time, within the world of ufology, you had a lot of people like Paul Benowitz, for instance, and different people involved in MUFON and these UFO organizations who were also worked in the field as contractors in aviation on stealth fighter projects and a lot of other classified projects who were also involved in ufology. So that was kind of the interest there with Falcon, whoever he was, and other people in intelligence circles keeping track of these different people in ufology who also worked for the government on contracts. And at that same time also you had Russians, nationals, and Chinese, and also infiltrating these UFO groups to find out about these, using that as a cover to find out more about classified projects. So
and didn't Falcon turn out to be Doty? Isn't that correct?
Well,
or is that still not confirmed?
That gets a bit complicated, but at one point, Falcon said he was turning over like the liaison duties between Moore and him to Doty, so Doty would be his contact, and that's how Moore got involved in the Benowitz affair and some of these shady documents that were passed from Doty to Moore, and Moore was supposed to pass on to Paul Benowitz. And among those documents were the MJ12 documents, which Moore, so he claimed, they ended up on his research partner Jamie Shandera's doorstep in 1984. Postmarked from Albuquerque, New Mexico, but no name, sent anonymously. A lot of people point to, well, that might have been Doty right there. And so And what these documents were, I'm sure a lot of your listeners might have heard of these. They were some briefing documents by this super secret MJ-12 group made of government mucky mucks, like CIA director and these types, half a dozen or a dozen, MJ-12 dozen people that were prepared this briefing document for Eisenhower that claimed that, there had been a crash in Roswell, and that this group had been formed to deal with the UFO presence, and that there had been some type of secret treaty over the years, and that even as the story evolved, there was an alien in captivity. And so that was basically the MJ-12 documents, and they helped really confirm, in a sense, Moore's book from a few years before that, the Roswell incident. Now, in recent, over time, these documents pretty much were proved to be a hoax, but no one's really. The FBI looked at it and they found that the documents indeed were bogus, but they never could pin down who was responsible for them. A lot of people think it was Doty or Moore, or Doty or Moore working in cahoots. But go ahead.
Oh, no. I was just going to say, but Moore was interesting too, because he wasn't on board all the way. Didn't he kind of admit that some of the stuff was disinformation and people didn't like him for it?
Oh, certainly. And he has his critics, some who don't believe him, but his basic position, and he outlined this in 1989 at the big
MUFON conference, right?
Yeah, in Las Vegas, where he came out and really kind of laid it all out there, that he had this arrangement with the government, that he never knowingly passed on disinformation to Benowitz, that this kind of got sucked into this web tube, because as he said, you don't learn anything unless you play the game. But he also, he basically laid this out there for a group of ufologists who really got pissed off at this conference. And he brought some receipts and named names, and he said this whole thing, he didn't name Lear specifically, but it was obviously who he was talking about, and a couple of other ufologists at this time who had latched on to the Dulce story and basically taken the Benowitz story and just totally embellished it and took it to an even higher crazy level with false claims and whatnot. This was at the same time that Bill Cooper was involved in the scene. They're all kind of repeating similar stories about MJ-12 and Dulce Base or the Krill papers. These all basically overlapped,
And Cooper was there at that MUFON conference, right, 1989, and he had pretty outlandish kind of statements about what was going on.
Well, yeah, he was basically presenting the same story that Lear was as well. There was a little twist on each of them. They had, different, a little bit different angles, but they were relating the same story about an MJ-12 group that was looking into this, and a secret treaty. And Lear, even took it to a crazier level, that the whole cattle mutilation thing was part of this larger scheme by the aliens that were doing creating these human-alien hybrids, and the mutilations played into this, and that they were also extracting fluid from human babies. The aliens needed this to survive. It just got totally crazy. But a lot of these folks were kind of repeating this same story now, so it stuck in the consciousness of folks and became a larger legend by the mid '90s. You had Phil Schneider, another famous name, who latched onto it as well. Schneider was later, and I kind of laid out in this book, had mental problems and was a self-mutilator and all of this. He later claimed his self-mutilations were part of a Dulce firefight, that the same one that Tom Costello, fictional character, talked about this. And Tal later told me that he was also feeding information to Phil Schneider during this period. So all these stories kind of
and
come
you
together.
You said Tal was feeding it to Bill Cooper as well. So Tal was seeding all these guys with these stories, and Schneider literally cut off his fingers, right? His own fingers?
Yeah, he did. And I can't totally confirm, Tal told me he was feeding information to everybody, but some of it over time has proved out, that, yeah, he was indeed in contact with a lot of all these people. I can't prove that if you believe Tal, that everything came from him, but I know certainly a lot of these stories and legends came from Tal and his involvement over the years.
But can you also had a chapter about Bob Lazar, who I saw on Joe Rogan. There, Joe Rogan kind of pops up a couple times. A couple of people who are on Rogan pops up in your book.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk about Lazar and what your opinion of him is?
Well, I'm dubious about a lot of these folks, and Lazar really came to the attention of folks in around that time in the late '80s, when because of his association with John Lear, who's once again seems to be one of those people like Tal and a few others are at the center of these stories. And of course, Lear claimed that, he was employed at Area 51 back engineering craft, and he was blowing the whistle on this. Originally, George Knapp, the journalist, TV guy out of Las Vegas, interviewed him because through John Lear. And at that time, his first interview, Lazar was using the name of Dennis. Later, he got outed or revealed himself. But and so what transpired after that was that Lear and Lazar and another guy named Gene Huff started really the first ones to go out to Area 51, or a place where you could view into Area 51, where all these sightings of quote unquote UFOs or whatever they were going on. And once again, it became a sensation during that period. And a lot of the spin on these things with that they were alien craft, and Lazar was promoting a lot of these. For instance, Lazar also promoted the story about there had been an underground confrontation at Area 51 that he viewed in a briefing paper that sounded a hell of a lot like the whole Dulce thing. So it seemed like the same playbook was being used again and again. And here we're many years later, and these same characters seem to keep popping up again and again like it's a new thing.
Right. And it was interesting too, because I didn't know all the background about these guys surfacing on Coast to Coast AM. So they had all kind of known each other and kind of came up. And that, to me, would you agree that that's how a lot of this stuff became popularized in the culture?
Yeah. And Robert Bigelow's another player in this he's Bigelow, he's been involved in the space industry and and really involved with a lot of these stories, promoting quote unquote science into UFOs and weird phenomena. And he links up with a lot of the characters in the stories over the year. And it was Bigelow, and of course, Bigelow later purchased the Skinwalker Ranch, where a lot of weird things are supposedly going on. But back in around 1993, I think it was, 94, Bigelow basically funded a radio program with Art Bell and George Knapp, another name that turns up, Linda Moulton Howe. She's in these stories. And this was prior to Coast AM. That's basically where Art Bell kind of started, and Art later commented that the reason he got into ufology was because of John Lear.
Right. So, like, these guys, I mean, very interesting backgrounds, yeah. And Knapp was also on Rogan, so these guys are still around. Knapp, Lazar.
Oh, yeah?
Also, you had that whole chapter on Tom DeLonge and To the Stars Academy, which was really interesting too.
Once again, some of the same characters who were involved with To the Stars Academy. I mean, when it was originally launched, it was like kind of a two-pronged deal. One would be entertainment, trying to get the message out there about space exploration and that type of stuff, but also a science wing that would look into strange phenomena, if there's been alien contact. And some of the folks involved in that, like Hal Puthoff, is one of these names who has allegedly been part of this group called the Aviary, which was kind of like an MJ-12 group that was involved with a lot of these same names, Richard Doty and different players. And Puthoff was also involved in the what they call it, Project Stargate in the early 70s, which the CIA funded for remote viewers, which another character called Kit Green, who was with the CIA, who was part of that project where they were looking at paranormal psychic phenomena. John Alexander is another guy involved. So once again, these guys turn up time and time again, and there's always this intelligence community aspect to a lot of these capers. Now whether they're all involved in a counterintelligence operation is another story. I think there's different agendas, and there's useful idiots sometimes that are involved in a lot of this. Like,
yeah, you do name some in the book. I don't want to repeat it, but
yeah.
It is interesting because the intelligence people, Stubblebind's I think he's friends with Alexander, and he's married to Rima Labo, who's friends with Bud Hopkins, and she's a experiencer psychologist or something. So there's a lot of very curious ties.
Incestuous, yeah.
Yes, very much so. It's a great book. I really recommend this book. There's so much more information here. It really flushed out like the Mirage Man story, and you have 10 times more information. The Mirage Man is actually kind of thin, to my opinion, on information. They do show some of the video of these people, but your book is way better. So I highly recommend that. Do you mind taking a few questions, Adam?
Oh, sure.
Christ the King asks, does he know anything about the TR3B Black Manta? I don't know what that is. Is that an inside joke? I don't know.
No, it sounds like some stealth technology of some sort or something, but no, I don't know anything specifically about that.
And you had one guy in the book who got arrested for like child porn or child rape. And here Ken is asking something about how many ufologists have been busted for child related. I assume that's child molestation or porn. It's certainly true of Stan Romanek. Can you talk?
Yeah. Stan Romanek, for sure. I don't know a lot about him, really. I mean, there's been other people who have alleged, like the famous Branton. There's stories that he got in trouble for those type of activities. So, yeah, there's definitely been some number of shady characters in ufology over the years.
Yeah, Doty's really a remarkable guy. Like,
oh my gosh,
yeah. and he's still around. Like you had a quote from him from 2018, Fade to Black or one of those shows. So he's still around, and he actually something strange happened with him. Can you talk a little bit about that? Like he ended up not doing his job or whatever.
With Doty?
Yeah. Didn't he end up going to Germany or something?
A lot of strange things have happened. What I think went on with Doty in 1984, he got shipped overseas. He was working in East Germany and apparently got in trouble. But according to other folks I've talked to, like Greg Valdez, who was Gabe Valdez's son, he really got in trouble for was leaking some classified goodies, and it might have been related to the whole MJ-12 caper. So he got around 1984 shipped overseas, and that's the same time the MJ-12 papers were released. Of course, Doty always denied that, and so while he was over there, he got stripped of his special agent duties, and a couple of years later ended up working in the mess hall there at Kirtland before his retirement, I believe, in around 1988 or so. But yeah, I mean, some of the things he's, like you said, he's still popping up in doing stuff like Fade to Black. And there was an interesting thing there. I mean, 90 to 95% of what he says is like BS. But as my friend Greg Bishop, who got to know Doty well and wrote a book on the Benowitz affair called Project Beta, there's like a 5% or a little bit of information there that's important that you can pull out and try to get it confirmed with other sources. And one thing that was interesting that he said during that recent Fade to Black interview was he was asked by Jimmy Church about, okay, are there still assets? Is the intelligence community still doing this in ufology and like cultivating assets like Bill Moore and others? And he said it wasn't really being done that much. I think nowadays with the internet and social media, you don't need to go to UFO conferences. But what he said that was interesting, he said Bill Moore really came to their attention not because of UFOs, because of contact he had with Russian nationals. As it turned out, Moore was before he got into ufology, he was a high school educator who taught Spanish and Russian. Supposedly he was fluent in Russian, and he had contacts with different Russian scientists and journalists who he is communicating this. And that's why he, according to Doty, why he came up on the radar of the Air Force.
Gotcha.
And Moore later was like the first to release a aerial photo of Area 51, which he supposedly got from, I later heard, and I think he even said, from Russians. So, yeah.
Can you talk about Robert Anton Wilson? You had like a friendship with him. You're also still a member of the Discordian group. Is that correct? Can you talk a little bit about that?
I guess you could say that.
Well, I was just curious about your relationship with Robert Anton Wilson because he's so influential.
Yeah. I got to know him when I was writing my book, The Prankster and the Conspiracy, about Kerry Thornley. Right. And interviewed him for that book. And, that's how I got to know him. And, it was an important resource for getting some insight on Kerry Thornley's whole story.
Because there was Kerry, all that stuff was in the Playboy mail-in stuff, right? All the conspiracy stuff that Robert Anton Wilson collected, that was part of it. Was that something like, is that true?
Yeah. So back in like 68 or so, they boy, this can get pretty deep into this stuff. But they started Thornley. They kind of had an interest. Thornley had been a target of Jim Garrison's investigation into the JFK assassination, because Thornley had known Lee Harvey Oswald in the Marines, and Garrison suspected that Thornley was some kind of handler, that he, with a cabal of some sort based out of New Orleans, that he had set Oswald up to, and Thornley had appeared before the Warren Commission, and so this was going on, and so he became a target of Garrison's investigation. And Garrison had a bunch of freelance investigators working for him, or just feeding him information. And one was a John Bircher named Alan Chapman, who claimed that the Bavarian Illuminati was behind the Kennedy assassination. And Thornley thought that was kind of hilarious, and they started screwing around with other investigators by sending these fake letters claiming to be the Bavarian Illuminati. They adopted names. Thornley was Omar Khayyam Ravenhurst, and he knew Robert Anton Wilson during this period through the Discordian Society, which was kind of a group of artists and writers who were interacting and doing kind of silly stuff in the name of Discordianism. And they started this what they called Operation Mindfuck, just to mess with different groups, John Birch Society.
Almost like
Kennedy
culture, like the first or earliest culture jammers. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, culture jammers for sure. And so there's that background. And what this led to was, like I said, this Operation Mindfuck. And at the time, Wilson was an editor for Playboy, and they dictated a letter and answer. He was the editor for the Playboy. I always forget the name. It was either the Advisor or the Forum, and they planted this letter. The writer was asking that they'd heard rumors that about this ancient secret society that it's been alleged was behind all the assassinations, and then Wilson answered the letter. And anyway, this kind of helped plant the seed, or pushed these legends of the Illuminati more out there into culture, or into the counterculture of the time. I mean, there was, like, with the John Birch Society and some on the fringe or far right of the political spectrum, they were promoting these theories. But at that time, it kind of also got picked up by the counterculture as well. And I think that was because of the influence of Wilson and Thornley and these others. And so Wilson there at Playboy started getting just more crazy letters from people. And all of this eventually inspired the Illuminatus trilogy, right, where he took a lot of these conspiracy theories and kind of fed them into the story of the book. He also includes the Discordian Society in the book, and their ages-old battle with the Illuminati. So all of this kind of pushed a lot of these memes and themes and legends into popular culture over the years.
Gotcha. Great. Well, we are coming to the end. Is there anything you'd like to add, or anything I missed, or where can people reach out? Where's the best place to buy the book, and your social media accounts as well? So
the book is published by Daily Grail Press, by some of your listeners may know. So check them out. But if you go there looking for the book, it'll lead you to Amazon. So like a lot of things these days, that's where to get it at Amazon. Saucers, Spooks and Kooks, UFO Disinformation, and the Age of Aquarius. I'm also on, if people are interested in the Discordian Society and all that, I have a website dedicated to it called Astoria Discordia. I'm also on Twitter. Have a couple of blogs. One is called Chasing UFOs, and if you go there, you'll see a Saucers, Spooks and Kooks resource page that shows a lot of the documentation and stuff behind the book. So yeah, that's basically it.
Well, I highly recommend this book. I learned a lot. There's tons of information in this. We barely covered a quarter of it, if that. So again, the author is Adam Gorightly, and the book title is Saucers, Spooks and Kooks, UFO Disinformation in the Age of Aquarius. Thank you so much.
Thank you, William. It was fun.